right? This is often a teacher's experience when it comes to using technology for the first time in a classroom.
Well, okay, I will mute everybody except user 16, and let's see what happens, okay?
Okay.
All right, so go ahead, Michael, take it away.
Okay, well, we'll get started again. Again, I'm Michael J., President of Educational Systemics, and our sponsor for Education Table Talk is MCA Strategic Data. And again, we appreciate their support in that. This show is our second show. Our first one was last month, and again, we had very, very positive responses, and really excited about doing this second show, where we'll be looking at the topic of are we preparing our teachers for the students of today, tomorrow, or yesterday? So our feedback from the last show was real fun. One of them was we had Myron call out to Myron that you cannot interact with the guests on the show. So you cannot interact with the guests from the show. So it's don't try yelling at your screen. You can certainly type, and we'll certainly get information back to you. We also received a nice little note about the segment called Guess the Rumor. And we now call that You Can't Handle the Truth, and you'll see why. The segment, they said, is interactive, fun, upbeat, and surprising, which is nice. And we did get one little piece of feedback from a practicing educator who indicated that the jury is out on the usefulness of the show. And I just wanted to respond to that and say, the audience for this is really intended to be people who are in the education industry, not necessarily practicing educators, although we know that we got some really good feedback from people who are involved with teacher education and other programs. So the focus here is on those who are serving the marketplace. So still, love to get your feedback and love to hear your thoughts around that. So let's go into a little discussion about our topic today. I wanted to start by saying that I just got done renewing my my teacher's credential. And it's sobering to look at when I first got that, but I have a clear credential from the state of California, and I have to renew that every 5 years, and I just renewed it, $72, $12 a year, lets me be a teacher in the state of California. And I was really reflecting back on my teacher education program and what that looked like. And I, although went through a lot of courses that were theoretical and did some of that as an undergraduate, and certainly did a lot of work as having to do with understanding what it means to manage a classroom and a whole myriad of different kinds of courses. The most useful time that I spent was really the time as a student teacher and really out in the schools. And I know you won't be surprised to hear that, but I think that where I really learned the most was spending time with those mentor teachers of a variety of different sorts. I had one teacher who had an assessment system that included students eating live crickets, which made me question the nature of assessment. But again, what are we trying to incite kids to do? What are we trying to, and how are we trying to engage them and get them excited about the topic? And I had one teacher who taught chemistry, who thought it was really applied mathematics and learned a lot from that process, and really found that, you know, when we're thinking about how we're preparing our teachers, it's about the experiences that we provide them. And that really will be the topic of conversation for today is what kinds of experiences are we providing teachers, student teachers? Part of this, certainly we can talk about both pre-service and in-service, and our guests for today's show are people who are really involved with that. So Cator is one of our guests, who is President and CEO of Digital Promise. Karen, say hi.
Good morning. How are you all? You can't answer me, but I'll assume you're all well.
They're all yelling at their screens, Karen.
Yeah, you're good.
And Karen, most recently, your role at the Department of Education and helping drive technology initiatives, and prior to that at Apple. And again, happy to consider you and somebody who's very thoughtful about education topics. So thank you, Karen, for being on the call today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alvin Crawford. Alvin is the CEO of Knowledge Delivery Systems, and I've known Alvin for probably at least a decade, from times over at SchoolNet and involvement with several different projects. Alvin, thank you so much for being on the call.
It's a pleasure, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone.
And lastly, we have, but certainly not least, we have James Welsh, who is a new friend, Assistant Director at the Florida Center for Instructional Technology. And James speaks all over the country and on topics around teacher education and technology and all that kind of goodness. So James, thank you so much for being on today's call.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Perfect. So before we engage these three wonderful guests of ours in conversation around the core topic, we're going to start out as we did last week with first, it's time to play You Can't Handle the Truth. And this is a segment in which we discuss, where each of our panelists read a particular rumor, and one of those rumors is actually a truth. And we found last time that in fact people did not guess the correct rumor and which one was truth. And so you'll have a chance within the WebEx to actually vote for what you think is the truth associated, which of these rumors is the truth. So why don't we go ahead and start reading our first one, which we call Testing Students or Scores. And who's reading this, Gila? James, you're reading this one.
I will read this one. It's a month into the Pittsburgh Public School District's calendar. Educator Jessie Ramey enters her middle school classroom ready to teach when an oral and written standardized test lands on her desk. With a knot in her stomach, she takes a deep breath and tries to exude confidence for her students as they break out their number 2 pencils and settle down. As she starts to administer the test, her students are optimistic and ready to show off their knowledge. She begins. The first question seems harmless enough. The students look okay, she says. Then you get to the second question of 106 questions. As the test moves on, she looks over her class. She tells us that, quote, by the 11th question, some of the students have their head on their desk. Others have given up completely or just feel stupid. Frustrated, she continues into the sections that are contrary to what she knows supports student learning. Yet she has to carry on. The test finally ends with little time for students to finish. For many, the skills that they were so confident about were shattered in the wake of the standardized test. Jessie comments, feeling just as defeated, I was leaving school for the weekend on the wrong side of that admonition.
Well, thank you, James, for that great job reading Testing Students or Scores. What's the priority? So there's a teacher who is left rather frustrated. Let's go to our next rumor.
Yes, then this one's called For the Good of the Student. Lauren Baker is an educator in Missouri. She spent half her planning time trying to understand a new web-based application and instructional resources that she was directed to use by her school district. After hours upon hours spent learning how to use the technology, which I'm going to add is a very bad use of time, because if a technology takes that much time to learn, it's probably not well designed. Okay. After hours upon hours spent learning how to use the technology, she realized that the new software was just a glorified pacing guide, and the pace it suggested did not allow for meaningful student engagement with the content. I had to make a choice on what would be most effective for my students. I knew it wasn't an easy choice, but I had to make one. She decided to address a few topics using engaging and thoughtful instruction versus covering the whole chapters with unprepared lessons. As a result, her children did well on the exam in certain areas, but failed in others. With her students below average on the grading scale, Ms. Burke is now in the spotlight, but not in a good way. So she explains, I'm all for the use of technology to support teaching and learning, but not at the expense of meaningful instruction. Unfortunately, her administrators disagreed and put her on probation.
Well, thank you so much for reading that, Karen. That was great. We're actually trying to create some things that are a little bit more upbeat. That one was a real bummer for me when I read it. So
that was kind of from beginning to end. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, and thank you for your addition there. So that was for the good of the student is what we call that rumor. So that's the second one. And let's go to the third.
So Steve Thornton is an impressive teacher. With the rise of Common Core, he knew that changes to school instruction was imminent. His school was chosen to begin a new integrated curriculum that blends STEM and ELA. After several weeks, some parents were beginning to complain that his teaching was inadequate. A math teacher joined his class, and they co-taught a set of lessons over a period of several weeks.
So there's actually an extended version to that. And
actually, let me do that because I was trying to. May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Steve Thornton is an impressive teacher. He excels in teaching ELA and has made a powerful connection with his students. With the rise of Common Core, he knew that changes to the school instruction was imminent. I was excited to implement something new, but I didn't realize what that meant, he explained. His school was chosen to begin a new integrated curriculum that blends STEM and ELA. The students were excited, but I was nervous with my knowledge of each subject and the ability to weave them together in a way that was accurate and thoughtful. Mr. Thornton says, after several weeks, some parents were beginning to complain that his teaching was inadequate. Mr. Thornton explained, I was trying to work with the tools and time constraints that I had, but I knew I was out of my depth. That's when he began to team teach. A math teacher joined his class, and they co-taught a set of lessons over a period of several weeks. Mr. Thornton comments, it was difficult at first, but we found a rhythm that made the students feel confident in their learning ability, and that, combined with good instructional methods, is what it's all about.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Alvin. I knew you'd find that, so we do provide that abbreviated version, but thanks for reading that, Alvin. So
no worries.
You'll have some time here now. You should actually see there it is. The poll just came up. Which do you think is the truth? Testing, students or scores, for the good of the student, or finding a rhythm? So I guess that was edited. I called that rhythm method in my original one, but I guess I got audited there or something. So vote for one of those three, and you'll have about 10 minutes in which to do that. So please do that. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and move ahead with our core topic, ready or not. Are we preparing teachers for the learners of today, tomorrow, or yesterday? If you have any questions, please submit them via Twitter at EdTableTalk or via the WebEx question area, the chat area, and we'll make sure we address those. So let's get started with this. I started out this session today talking about my teacher preparation and the time that I had spent in classrooms versus the theoretical work that I was doing in classroom versus my time out in the schools. Any thoughts about how you strike balance around that?
I'll jump in, Michael. This is Karen. So I would 100% agree that the time in classrooms is by far the most useful for people. They can, interact in real time with real kids, real teachers, understand much more about the realities, and then if they have a good support system back in the actual classroom, that's obviously that's helpful as well. There are, I remember in my student teaching, I just about quit teaching profession because of one of my pretty bad situations that I was in, and it wasn't that the teacher was bad or anything, but it was a situation where kids were in an inner city school with no playground, no outdoor time, no recess, and they literally were in this school all day long. These were first graders, and it was so depressing that I thought, I'm not going to teach anymore. Went back to my college and talked with my advisor and others, and clearly they turned me around, and I actually helped create a unit that got at some of the more active learning kinds of things, physical activity. But I think that the main thing is that we need to make sure that student teachers are in schools. I suppose at some point it's nice to have sort of that reality check, but I think it's also really helpful if we want to change the way that teachers are making assignments and interacting. I think we need to make sure that they are in schools that are very sort of modernized and great places to learn.
Well, Karen, if I can build on that, this is Alvin. It seems that not just in pre-service, but once teachers come on board to the district, that the support system has to be more focused on helping to build capacity in teachers, not just in the beginning. They say it takes 3 to 5 years to make to get to become a good teacher, so to speak. I don't know that you always start as an excellent teacher, but I think that if more of the focus was helping to build the knowledge and skills within teachers to actually teach kids of this generation, I think we'd be better off. Just to quickly quote Jeffrey Canada, he says, why is it that when we had rotary phones, we were having folks being crippled by polio, that we were teaching the same way that we do now? And that's to where we are, I think, today versus where we should be for the kids of today.
So are you saying, Alvin, that we're preparing teachers for the learners of today, tomorrow, or yesterday?
Yesterday.
That. Yeah.
Yesterday, and actually, I think the ed schools are working hard. I think that districts need to rethink their strategy towards helping to develop the good resources that they find to support the kids
working
today.
Hard or hardly working? Which are you saying?
Well, I'm going to back out of that. I always realize that the ed schools are working, and I think that they're different. You know, if you compare some to others, you know, the jury's still out. But you know, once you become a teacher in a school as a certified professional, there's still a lot of growth and development that needs to happen. Just look at the attrition rates. You know, you lose 30% of teachers in the first 3 years, 50% in the first 5. We've got to continue to develop folks once they get into the system.
Can I tag off of that? Yeah, because I think that's so true. That when we're preparing teachers in a college of education, I'm in a college of education, and when we're preparing teachers in a college of education, it's really important to build an understanding in those pre-service teachers that they're at the beginning of their journey to becoming a teacher, and that they learn about how to teach children every day of their career. They don't stop learning when they graduate from a college of education. This is the foundation, but you learn about teaching kids to read every day that you're teaching kids to read. You learn about teaching kids to write every day that you're teaching kids to write. You have to be committed. I think as a classroom teacher, you have to be committed to being a lifelong learner. And it's incumbent upon colleges of education to set those kinds of expectations to help build teachers that are resilient to the conditions that they'll have out in schools. Teachers have to be ready for a constantly changing environment and a difficult environment. It's not an easy job, and I think that's a really important thing that colleges of education can do to prepare them. As far as the question, are we preparing for today, tomorrow, or yesterday? Yes is the answer, I think. We don't have one way of preparing teachers in this country. And so program to program and system to system and state to state, you're going to find lots and lots of different situations all happening at the same time.
I would totally agree with James on that, that I think that when we ask these questions and try to answer for this great big wide country, you know, with one answer to any of these things, I think the most helpful thing is to, instead of saying, are we doing this, and have one yes or no answer, you know, one way or the other, it's to find the excellent areas and try to spotlight those and talk about those, because I think that the problem isn't that we don't have excellence. I think the problem is that we don't have equity. And so there are schools of education that are absolutely excellent and doing a fantastic job of preparing teachers, and then we have other schools that are not. And so I think we want to spread those experiences that are the very best across to many more colleges of education.
But do we want to limit it to just colleges of education? Because I think that a lot of the development and support, as James said, happens in the schools, or maybe doesn't happen in the schools, and maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. You're scaffolded throughout your entire career. You might have been working for 12 years in a classroom and be a very accomplished teacher, and for the first year you have a student with a certain learning disability or something like that in your classroom. That's the year that you're going to learn that. So every year you're learning something new about those kids in your classroom, and learning new tricks, as they say.
Well, and Karen, think of one-to-one initiatives and whether or not teachers are prepared in certainly in their pre-cert training, but then are they actually adequately supported in classrooms with adequate professional development?
Yeah, learning new things.
Well,
right.
I think we need
whose responsibility is that professional education? I mean, clearly we can say the institution, but ultimately as a professional, what is my role as a teacher?
Well, I think it works both ways. I mean, we invest so much money in professional development today. They say on average about $10,000, and yet most of that is poorly designed and developed professional development. So they're getting inundated. Teachers are with what is called PD, but not with opportunities that really help them develop their skills.
Absolutely. I agree with that, and I think I think that happens, and I think also there is high quality professional development that happens. It's it's an inconsistent thing, but I think that there needs to be, in the best of scenarios, you have a district that has a strong commitment to professional development that allows teachers adequate time outside of their classroom teaching time to develop as professionals, and that's formal sessions, but also peer learning and giving them the freedom as professionals to figure out what they need and support them in that. I don't think that one size fits all for the kids in our classrooms, and I don't think one size fits all for teacher preparation or for professional development for teachers.
Absolutely, and so then there is I totally agree, and so then there is this, to Michael's point, this notion that people need to be responsible for their own learning and find those places that can support them. And I think just as we want to better personalize the learning environment for students, we also want to support personalized learning for teachers, and so that teachers can be sort of articulating and finding what they need when and where they need it to support their goals and their particular challenges at the time they need it.
Makes good sense to me.
Let's go. I want to go to the next slide here, and that really takes us to looking at the Connected Educator Month. So this month, at Connected Educator Month, there are really 5 major themes to this month. Maybe we can talk a little bit about these as they relate to where we were in the conversation. Making it count, connected leadership, so part of that as well, the personalized learning, innovating STEM and literacy, and then 21st century classroom management. Maybe, how do those relate to the things we were just discussing?
Well, I'll jump in just, so last year when I was at the U.S. Department of Education, we launched Connected Educator Month in August, and what it was for was to spotlight all of the myriad opportunities there are to learn together online, to learn with your peers, to learn with experts, to learn from content that's been published. There were book clubs and games and challenges and webinars and focus groups and online conversations, lots of things happening, and we spotlighted that for an entire month. I think this is incredibly powerful because what we have now, this year the department has been doing it in this month of October. What we have is a growing understanding of all of those opportunities that there are to learn every single day with each other. These communities of practice are incredibly powerful, and we're getting, I should say, again, one size doesn't fit all. Some communities of practice are incredibly powerful. Some of them are small and really good for the small group of people that are involved. Some are large communities, and they have lots of interaction and things going on. So I think it's a really powerful initiative, Connected Educator Month, and we can all stand to be involved and learn a lot from that.
Agree with that, and agree with the concept of teachers learning on an ongoing basis, so it's not just an event, but that teachers can collaborate and share in a very connected way that can impact practice.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Go ahead, James. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I will say, or go ahead, did you want to continue? Sorry.
No, that's fine. You've said it very well, so.
Thank you. So on the connected leadership side, certainly as all the research says, the principal and having leaders that are engaged and are focused on leading instruction is powerful. So having them connected and also having them lead and guide kind of collaboration amongst teachers is really powerful as well.
And, I mean, technology is only a piece of that, but I think so often when we talk about the National Education Technology Standards, the NETs, we certainly focus on the NETs for students, and there's some awareness around NETs for teachers, but that NETs for administrators is a piece that I think people often forget about, and what an important part that plays in any initiative around that. I mean, Karen, when you were at the department or even the work that you did at Apple, I mean, what sort of things did you find were effective? And often the administrator can be so disconnected from student achievement or does it at such a large level. How do you bring that closer to practice?
I mean, I think that, again, that all districts are different. In some cases, that the superintendent needs to be kind of an instructional leader if it's a smaller place. At any rate, leaders need to model what it's like to be a leader, or I'm sorry, what it's like to be a learner, and a leader for that matter, but what it's like to be a learner, showing that they are interested in new ideas, they're constantly talking and interacting with people, they are supporting people in trying new things, very clearly focused on goals, always looking at the evidence, including stories and examples coming from classrooms. I mean, there is so much that a leader can do to support a very robust and engaging modern learning environment. And, I think clearly the role of leadership is really important, which is why, Connected Educator Month has that as one of its 5 key topics. I think there are some really interesting leadership communities of practice online. I think some of them, sometimes it's difficult for superintendents to be in public communities of practice, which is why some of, just because they'd like to have the opportunity to discuss things with their peers and work things out before they become kind of, public or whatever. So, I think that this is evolving, and superintendents, just like the rest of us, are having to learn fast, keep up, learn how to learn new things, adjust to emerging new policy and issues that they thought they'd never be dealing with in their career.
I have a quick story about that. I was asked when I was student teaching to prepare a lesson about teeth for middle school class. And, I did that. I got all prepared and down to details, and I went to teach it, and I had prepared a lesson about dentition and evolution of teeth. And the teacher, when she reviewed my lesson, said, "Oh, I wanted you to teach how to take care of your teeth, like how to brush your teeth or floss." And I totally missed the point. And, this idea of sort of over-preparation sometimes and missing the mark in terms of what the real need is an issue. I found when I was teaching physics, I did not do problems in advance. I thought it was important that kids saw me stumble and saw me make mistakes and saw me hit dead ends. Because the tendency when you get home and you're doing your homework is you go, well, Mr. J got it. How come I didn't just get it straight out like that? I mean, how do we do the same thing with teachers as we're preparing student teachers? How do we as teachers prepare them for those kinds of issues? The same thing for administrators. I'm looking at how do you show how you make mistakes and recover from those, because that's the very nature of continuing to evolve and change practice, right? I mean,
I think modeling that is incredibly important. I think that university professors and those who are leading those kinds of experiences at the university need to be very comfortable with that idea. And it's technology is a place where you can feel that. I saw an interview with a teacher recently who was talking about she uses flipped classroom in her physics class, and she was talking about how when she started doing it, when she started videotaping her lectures, she was really bad at it. She was really bad at how to use the technology. And she took advice from her students at every step of the way, and she still does. But she's very confident now in the way that she's recording lessons, the way that she's posting them. But she laughs about it. You know, she says, you know, I was posting stuff that was upside down, or you know, I struggled with it, but it didn't stop her, and it didn't affect her confidence in her ability as a teacher. She was willing to not be an expert in that specific technology and to allow her students to guide her in the use of the technology, because she was confident in her role as an instructional leader in that classroom. It didn't rattle her to have the technology misfire and have a student show her how it works, which I think is really important when it comes to learning to integrate technology effectively. You can't go through a teacher preparation program and learn about the technology that you're going to use during even the majority of the early part of your career as a teacher. The technology changes too quickly, so you have to develop a flexibility with it, and develop a confidence that your preparation as a teacher is not about knowing which menu to click on or which button to click on. That's not what makes you important in the classroom. It goes far beyond that.
And maybe
yeah, I would
limited.
totally.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would totally agree with James, and I think what's interesting about that is often we say, oh, you know, teachers are digital, you know, immigrants, they don't know how to use the technology, and I think that's another thing that is just not worth saying anymore. I think we can stop saying that. I actually had somebody recently say, you know, we need professional development. Our teachers don't even know how to turn on the iPads, and I called them on it. I said, that is absolutely not true. Yeah. There's no way your teachers don't know how to turn on iPads. They of course do, and you know, we see 1-year-olds who know how to turn on iPads. And actually, you know, I was watching a 2-year-old the other day move from the old operating system on an iPhone to the new operating system. And this was a 2-year-old, and she was frustrated for a couple minutes. And as soon as someone showed her how you swipe differently and how things are, you know, different colors, and she found her icons again, she was totally comfortable. I mean, literally, you know, moments. And I think we are really lucky and at a very good juncture in education now, because we can now expect and demand technologies that don't require professional development to know how to use them. They should be intuitive and designed well out of the box. And then the professional development should be on, what does this mean pedagogically? How does this support my students in learning? When do I use it? How do I use it? What's my role? What's my student's role? I mean, the pedagogical and management things we do need to work on, but we used to spend so much time teaching teachers how to click on stuff.
Karen, I completely agree with you. It is the pedagogy and the learning how to actually teach effectively, where technology is just one additional instrument that they use. And I think the challenge is that not enough of the focus, especially when buying devices, is on the pedagogy and how to teach, and more of it is on how to open the device and things like that. So I completely agree that more of the focus has to be there, which also means that more of the coaching support has to be around transitioning that into practice.
I think it's also really important to make sure that teachers feel empowered and that they're critical consumers of technology. They shouldn't feel like they have to wait for somebody to tell them how to integrate something. You know, if they understand their students, they understand what teaching is, they understand pedagogical strategies, they should be able to look at a piece of technology critically and say, okay, these are the affordances of this technology. Here's how here are some ways, let me try some stuff out. Here are some ways that I can do this. And the other thing, there's just no barrier to finding information about how to get around technological problems anymore. And so, you know, the idea that, like, oh gosh, how do I record a narration in my slideshow? Well, you can search that in any number of search engines and come up with videos that will show you step by step exactly how to do it. So it's really important to not feel like I have to wait for somebody to come and tell me how to do this, but to go out and get the information. It's out there, you know, and to be empowered and to be critical.
One of the really cool things. sorry, Michael,
Karen.
go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just, one of the really cool things that, thanks, one of the really cool things that we can do now, and I think that can be a focus, as all teachers and students begin to have the technology in their own hands, teachers can begin to focus on new kinds of assignments. So, you know, we talk a lot about deeper learning and experiences, and the more we can use the technology simply to support those deeper learning experiences, the better. So if you think about it, if a student has a device in their hands, they have productivity tools, they have publishing tools, they have communication tools, they have you know, music composition, movie making. They have all of these tools that simply come on the device, you know, generally speaking, the kinds of devices we want in the hands of students. And those are some of the things we almost don't talk about a lot, but they, you know, just with no instructional software, they have the entire internet and they have all of these productivity tools. All of that really supports this whole notion of deeper learning experiences that require collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and those kinds of things that are really important. And so that's where, again, a lot of professional development should be placed, is how do we create with students and for students deeper learning experiences, and what kinds of skills do teachers need in order to, you know, orchestrate an environment like that.
And Karen, I think that's where we see a lot of, of reluctance, is to actually shift and change teaching methodologies and the role that the teacher plays, and the amount of control. And I think to some extent that has a lot to do with our ability to connect to where students are. They know school is a place you go where something gets done to you, and then you go home and you do with the things that are of interest to you.
Yeah, I would just add that we see also a lot of places that are doing these things. So again, I think we should shift our focus on the places that are doing it, and not say that, you know, this is how, you know, everybody's experience is, that, you know, school is a place things are done to you, but rather find those places where the really inspiring things are happening, and begin just to talk much more broadly about those.
Absolutely.
Well, and what characteristics do those schools or districts have? Because I think that pointing to the instance itself, it's really understanding the underlying thing. For example, what professional development is being done, what leadership buy-in and support, and I'm sure a number of factors that you know very well, Karen.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to point out a few different teacher networking communities. Many of you are probably aware of several out there. Edutopia, I find actually is nice because it gives a real broad view, including that kind of administrative leadership role, but also is real accessible, I think, by a student teacher or a new teacher. EdWeb, and I'll just say for full disclosure, our sponsor, MCH Strategic Data, is part owner of EdWeb, but we find EdWeb is a real good quality resource for teacher engagement and discussion around practices, discovery education. We can name many of others. The three of you, any things you want to share about these or other networking communities?
Yeah, I would agree about EdWeb, and they do have they have a growing set and actually an improving practice around setting up these communities. So I think that's actually an interesting one. I would also point out the National Science Teachers Association has one of the most robust communities of science teachers, and they also have, you know, launched this whole notion of badges and things that people can earn as they work through the kinds of learning opportunities that they have.
I'd echo Karen's sentiment around EdWeb for sure. Go on.
No, and James, I know you're real active with several different in your teacher ed role.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I would agree with what you're saying about EdWeb and these other pieces. And I like the resources I frequently find myself using. Read, Write, Think. In my area specifically is literacy, and so that's a resource that I think is very important.
Perfect. And I do want to add a call out to a shout out to Al Byers at NSTA, who I think has done a real nice job growing that NSTA presence. So great guy. So and then we have a little note here from one of our listeners that that Twitter, of course, is another place where there's a lot of interaction.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
Can you say any more about that, James?
Sure. And one of the things that we talk about with our pre-service teachers here is building a personal learning network. And, you know, I mean, that's a concept that we're all familiar with. And it's important that teachers go out there with that concept because they're choosing the things professionally that they want to focus on. And, you know, as I was saying before, the information is out there, and building a professional learning network that includes things like Twitter, that includes things like education bloggers that are writing about the topics that you're interested in, that includes podcasts and other kinds of networks like EdWeb, is really important to being empowered and getting information about your profession. I think that you cannot overestimate the importance of a teacher feeling like he or she is in the driver's seat of their own career as a professional, and feeling like they have some ownership over their own professional learning and what's going on in their classroom.
Yeah, I love that. I would also, yeah, totally. The other way of looking at communities of practice online is by following an individual. So rather than going to this is a yes and, in addition to going to these communities and finding information in the community, you also can find a person and follow them from community to community and figure out the places that they hang out and where they are finding inspiration, ideas, and their own professional development. So it is that's kind of I think the role of Twitter, for example, is the opportunity to follow a person, you know, around. And one of the things we were thinking about also is how to connect communities better together. You know, so across, you know, resources from one community to the next. And I think that one of those ways is through the people that are involved in them.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'll also, you know, just throwing out there, I'll mention Twitter. I'm sorry, not Twitter. We've already said that. I'll mention Pinterest. I find a lot of valuable stuff on Pinterest.
I'll also say that, and I'm saying this because from an infrastructure standpoint, districts need to do a better job of providing ways for teachers to engage collaboratively, both online, either leveraging some of the existing social networks or creating their own opportunities to do that. I think that support needs to be in place. I certainly think teachers have to go outside to find additional resources, but I think that there's so many people within districts that don't get a chance to collaborate as often as they should in this 21st century environment.
Thank you for that, Alvin, and thank you for that conversation. We'll have a chance to come back and do a little quick roundup on that, but I'd like to, one of the ways that we thank our guests for participating in this, in Education Table Talk, is by, we don't give them actual money. You know, there's no actual cash exchanging hands. We do, however, I know, sorry about that. Well, you may be. We'll talk about that one. So, Donors Choose is a site that I've always really liked, and it's an opportunity to support for educators to say, here are projects that I'm doing where I need some additional support, and a chance for anybody to be able to support their work. So we actually give each of our guests $50 that they can spend as they wish on any of the projects that are out on Donors Choose. And so this is a chance for them to tell you a little bit about the project they chose to support. So James, maybe you can tell us a little bit about using a mini to do big things.
Sure. This is a school, this is a high poverty school in rural Michigan. And this is a 3rd through 5th grade teacher who is bringing iPads into the classroom to do a number of different things. The reason I chose this is because one of the things that this project focuses on, there are a lot of projects that involve iPads or bringing other kinds of technology into the classroom, but I really appreciated the open approach that this teacher used in thinking about how these things apply. And so this teacher, for instance, talks about using the iPads to create movies, and tying that in with reading. And this goes back to what Karen mentioned before about the kinds of apps that are open creation tools rather than sort of locked down to one idea. And so I think that filmmaking in the classroom is something that I'm very passionate about. We have a summer camp that we've run for the past 10 years doing digital video, and I've worked in a lot of classrooms locally on incorporating digital video into the curriculum in lots of different ways, in lots of powerful ways. So I like the way this teacher is thinking about using the technology and integrating video.
That's great. Thanks for that, James. You know, Education Table Talk is not just about technology, really about practices and all the other pieces. But it looks like we have 3 technology projects here. So Karen, maybe share with us a little bit about 1,000,000 ways to learn on the iPad.
Yeah, and actually that's interesting. I mean, this isn't actually, I don't see this as a technology project. I see it as a teacher that is resource-strapped, trying to figure out how to meet the needs of their students. So I was struck by the first part of his commentary, and he said, you know, workbooks, textbooks, and worksheets work well in the class, but for kids who have a challenge learning, other approaches to learning need to be taken. And I would say that today, in 2013, that workbooks, textbooks, and worksheets definitely should not be the norm. So that's one thing, but be that as it may, all he's asking is one iPad so that he can work with his students who have learning disabilities and provide alternative pathways for them to get at the content. So, you know, it just seems like, wow, like he doesn't ask for much. He really wants a way to meet the needs of these students, and he goes on to describe the kinds of things that would help for the specific, you know, the needs of the students in his special day class in grades 3 through 5. So, you know, again, thank you for, I think this is a good idea, and thanks for making that donation on my behalf.
Sure. And Alvin, Classroom Kindles.
Yes, and so this is a high poverty group of students where technology is all around them, but they're frustrated that they don't have technology in the classroom. So she wants to help them get excited, not just about new topics, but about participating kind of in hands-on learning. So she's trying to build critical thinkers within the classroom, and this is hoping to reach students by providing some technology-enabled support around becoming critical thinkers. And felt like this was a neat project where it was exposing kids to the technology that is around them that perhaps they don't have access to.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And you can actually see each one of those at our Donors Choose page. So again, thank you, all 3 of you, for your participation and selecting those. Let's go back, as I said, let's go back to any concluding thoughts about, are we preparing teachers for the learners of today, tomorrow, or yesterday? We had a good conversation about environments to support teachers, but let's circle back to this fundamental question. Any thoughts? We said it's sort of all right, but
I think we said it all, and I think you know, we have a tremendous opportunity to improve learning today with the power of technology primarily, and with new understanding about how people learn and the ways in which we can support individuals in their own learning endeavors. And I think we just need to bring that to the teacher population as well.
And I'll say that a lot of the emphasis across the country has been on accountability and not on support and development of human capital. And so I will agree that teachers certainly need to go out and explore and commit to being lifelong learners. But I think organizationally, districts have to be way more focused on developing the knowledge and skills within their body of teachers and leaders, so that we do have a workforce that's really prepared to help kids meet the needs of the 21st century and beyond.
I'll tag off of that and say that I think that absolutely the districts need to be committed to creating an environment where teachers learning and growing as professionals is the norm and is the expectation. And committed meaning they give teachers time outside of their teaching time, give teachers time outside of their classroom time with students to engage and grow as professionals. A lot of the informal learning communities that we've talked about, the online pieces and Twitter and things like that, these are great, and they tend to take place on the teacher's personal time. And I think that it's important for districts to commit to giving teachers that time to grow as professionals.
Great. And Lisa Schmucky in the chat has mentioned the importance of librarians in supporting teachers, in their learning role and their support in terms of the school environment itself, and helping lead some of that change. So I think our librarians, media specialists, where they still exist, I know that certainly has been an issue and a challenge around continuing to fund those kinds of positions. So, but absolutely key. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the upcoming conferences. I'll just mention that our sponsor, MCH, has an early childhood panel that is next week that I'm going to be moderating, and actually our topic for next month's show on the 13th of November is going to be on early childhood. So we'll certainly be bringing some of that to you. NAEYC is coming up next month. I can't remember. Have any three of you been to NAEYC?
I have in the past. I haven't in the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a conference that I've been to, actually. So something that I certainly would like to make my way to. Let's talk. We talked a little bit last month about the Association of American Publishers CEO Roundtable. I think, Alvin, is that something you've attended before?
I've attended in the past. It's a great networking event, and generally recognize some folks who've done amazing work. Always great speakers, and always a good opportunity to network.
So you can contact the AAP if you're interested in participating in that. That's on the afternoon of December 9th. And then the SIA EdTech Business Forum is the evening of the 10th and all day on the 11th. Any of you want to chime in about that conference?
It's another great networking event where there are lots of peers for collaboration from a business development perspective. It's just a great conference.
I also like what they do with the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the very, very early startup ideas. They surface some of that at that conference as well, which is actually very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And as I mentioned, my organization, Educational Systemics, runs the One-to-One Connections program there. So if you're interested, contact us or SIA about that. And James, this is in your backyard, FETC. Tell us a little bit about FETC.
Yeah, FETC is great. It's historically, that is the conference that brings together state and district and school leadership on educational technology, and a lot of really terrific education initiatives in Florida have been started or been nurtured at FETC. But it's very it's focused on practitioners, but it also has a very strong leadership focus. So you see a lot of district leaders and discussions among district leaders and state leaders that happen at that conference.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So we're back to, and again, I hope people get a chance to make it to these conferences. We're back to You Can't Handle the Truth. We did not tell our guests this time which of them was actually reading the truth. So amongst the three of you, which one do you think was the truth?
Alvin says number 3.
Yeah, James says number 3 also.
Okay.
Yeah, I think number 3. I would hope none of them were, but I think probably number 3.
Number 3
I hope
was
number
the most.
2 was not.
Right, number 3 was the most positive. The other 2 were sad, so
yeah.
I'm hopeful that it was 3.
That's a great way to judge it. I like that. So, presentation goddess, can you tell us which one is got the votes? So we see it's a tie between A and C, neck and neck, with B clearly being, again, being the furthest out. Well, it turns out that the real one is the one on testing students or scores. So this is actually
sad.
Who had selected, you know, to make that kind of decision, and she, you know, just real tough being put that, and that tells you what teachers face regularly, is
Michael,
you know, having to provide assessments. Yeah, James.
Michael, can we vote that one not true?
you could wish not true. So,
make it go away.
We'll post a link to that. Yeah, see, you can't handle the truth. So we'll post a link to the actual story, so you'll get a chance to take a look at that. So we're going to ask you, of course, each of the three of you to give us a new student teacher some advice. At the very end of the show, what advice would you give an educator who is entering a pre-service teacher program? Before we do that, I do want to thank MCH for their sponsorship and support of this program, and I do want to thank each one of our program people our guests for their support for the show and being on the show. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, James, and thank you, Alvin, as well.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
So, with that said, let's go ahead. Our next topic, of course, is going to be about early childhood. For those of you who are on the show, listening to the show today, or listen later, tell us how you think early childhood teachers should prepare their students to be lifelong learners. Particularly, you know, again, looking at establishing habits with young kids early on. So let us know. You can do that either via email to tila@edtabletalk.org or posting to Twitter at edtabletalk. So let's go ahead to your thoughts. What would you what advice would you give an educator who is entering a pre-service teachers program? Karen, you want to go first?
Sure. I would say to number one, focus on your own learning. Analyze the heck out of everything you're doing to help yourself learn, so that you're constantly improving your own ability to learn. And second is to make very good friends with your professors, so that you can get inside their own heads and figure out how they're making decisions about the learning opportunities that you have. Great.
Thank you, Karen. Alvin?
And I would say that again, focus on lifelong learning and growth and development. But remember, from a research perspective, that they say it takes about 50 hours of PD for a teacher to change their practice. And so, don't forget that there's no shortcut. So to go deep into the work, because it'll help you tremendously in your future.
Perfect. Thank you, Alvin. And James?
I would say don't expect to be an expert. Don't expect to be a master teacher when you leave your teacher preparation program. To have realistic expectations that it will take years to become a master teacher, and that you need to, as an educator going into the field, you need to seriously commit to lifelong learning. It's not about checking off a list of classes until you get your certification. It's about learning to be a professional, not just for the next 2 years or 4 years, but for the rest of your career.
Thank you again, all three of you. Thanks for joining us at the table. And our next show is on the 13th of November, and we look forward to seeing you all here. And thanks again to MCH Strategic Data for your support for Ed Table Talk. Bye, everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.